Hey, how you doing, everyone? Welcome back to Big Frog's 4x4. Today's episode, we're working on this 2017, a friend of mine's truck, L5P Dmax, and we're going out with the old, in with the new. This is the Wehrli turbo down pipe, and telling you what, if you're a beginner, this is probably not a job for you. I have two shorts that I'll put links for in the description of some of the problems I ran into. But other than that, I'm just going to kind of give you an overview real quick of how and what I had to use to get this out. Alright, the first thing you got to do is obviously open the hood. And at the back of the engine, back by the firewall, you see where the turbo and stuff's in the valley of the engine. And you have this heat shield that goes over top of the turbo area. This sensor is right here in this hole in this heat shield. Now, I did see on one write-up or video where someone cut a hole on both sides of this and then removed, or actually I think they came this way, and removed the heat shield and left the sensor in. I don't like to do that kind of stuff to other people's vehicles. If it's your vehicle and you want to cut that, that's up to you. But for this person's vehicle, a friend of mine, I bought the socket. And like I said, link in the description for that socket set and the tools that I needed. It's a 17 millimeter. You cannot get a regular socket on it because of the wire. And you can't get a wrench on it because of the angle. I even tried heating and bending a wrench to get on there. And you just cannot get on at the right angle. It just wants to start slipping off. And actually started to get a little bit of a round on the end of the nut for this. As soon as I got the proper tool, broke it right free, screwed right out. Now, you don't have to remove the other heat shield, but to give yourself more room for your arm to get down in there, it's a 22 millimeter standard oxygen sensor, and you have to use that oxygen sensor removal socket and get that out, screw that out, and then you can unbolt that heat shield as well and move it a little bit to the side just so you have more room to get your arm down in. All those bolts are 10 millimeter. Like I said, the oxygen sensor is a 22 millimeter, and this one is a 17 millimeter. Now, you're going to want to expect to have hours, at least an entire full day, probably 10 hours or so in this job. One of the hard parts is getting down in behind the turbo, and I can show you since my arm's not in there right now, and getting this clamp off. It's either you can use a 7/16 ratchet wrench or an 11 millimeter ratchet wrench, and you got to loosen that almost the entire way. And when you do that, it takes forever because you're sitting underneath there, underneath the firewall, underneath the cowl and stuff. Small turn at a time. Click, 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 click. And it got almost all the way out so you can get that opened up enough that you can fish it off of your pipe. Now, when it's up inside the truck, sitting in there like this, and that is kind of sitting there like that. It's sitting in the truck like this. And like I said, you're ratcheting back and forth. Once you get it loose, you can take I took a brass drift, because this will be stuck. Like this will back off, but this will be stuck onto the pipe. I took a brass drift and kind of tapped it, a long drift, and tapped it on both sides until it broke free. And that way it could be spun. And then you can spin it a little bit more and get a little bit more room to ratchet back and forth for this nut. Do not loosen it. You shouldn't have to take it all the way off. If you do, make sure you don't drop it down on top of the transmission because you'll never find it. That's with all the bolts. Don't drop them because you'll probably never find it. It'll go tink tink and that's it. It'll be gone. This also has a sensor on, 17 millimeter, but you can just unplug that and leave that in if you're careful when feeding it down out of the engine. Let's see. That's about it for up top. Get the heat shield out of the way. Get this unbolted and this loose and knocked free. If you don't have a brass drift, you can take a pry bar and put it down here at the base and tap it with a pry bar and try to get it all broke free that way. That way it's loose. So now let's get back. I'll show you up top. Now if you can see where my flashlight's shining, that's where the pipe bolts on. If you have really big arms or really big hands, you might have a problem getting in here. One of the videos do say about pulling the EGR cooler pipe off and give yourself more room. I didn't have to. My arms aren't quite that big. You'll see here where some of the heat shield bolts go on. The other sensor screws into there. But to go down here, like I said, you have to get that clamp off of that pipe, off the turbo, off your cat. Well, I'm not, do they call them cats? I think it's a cat. Coming off the turbo and getting that clamp off of there. That's the hardest part up in here. So now we're going to go down underneath and we'll look at what's going on there. So this is the hole that you're dealing with. That tiny little space. See if I can get the camera up there. There's where your pipe bolts onto coming down. And it goes up. Yep, can't really, oh, there we go. You can kind of see it up there. There's, let's see, I can't remember now. I think they're 13 millimeter bolts that bolt that pipe to the back of the engine head here. I think it's, yeah, back of the engine head on a bracket. And then there's a bracket here. Let's see if I can get the little flashlight. There's a bracket right there. You'll see the two holes that come over and to the bottom of the pipe. And that's what supports the exhaust. You have to get those two bolts out there and the 4 bolts that are up there. Now I was able to use a ratchet wrench and a long bunch of extensions on a socket to get the bracket up there. I'll show you the bracket here in a minute. And you basically have to unbolt that all by feel because you can't see anything once you get your hand up in there. Like I said, someone with smaller hands, smaller arms, definitely makes the job a little bit easier. So give me a second here and I'll get the brackets. Alright, there's the 2 brackets. This bracket here, to my right, your right is the one that goes up on the top of the pipe and bolts to the back of the head and bolts to the pipe. The one to the left here is the one that bolts in the lower part of the pipe. And the mounting bolts for the 2 pieces of exhaust go through those 2 holes there at the bottom that you see. And then it has 2 other holes there, then that bolt down to the engine that I showed you earlier. Oh, there is your exhaust donut. It is reused. You also have to reuse the nuts that go in the back of the pipe. You're also supposed to reuse the front bolts that go down through that bracket. But there is no way, unless you have a brand new truck, that's probably going to happen. Like I said, I'll put a link in the shorts, but this is the bracket. That's the bracket that's supposed to go down through there. And if you watch my shorts video, I'll explain everything that happened with that. But obviously you can tell one of them broke off. So now I need to get new hardware to put down through there. At least on the one side. I might be able to cut that bracket off the other side and reuse it and not use the one on the left. So we'll see when I go to put back together what I have to run into. Now when you're fishing the pipe out of there, you have to get this exhaust pipe. My light's not going to shine on, but the other, your down pipe, your pipe going back the truck, you have to get that pulled down and towards the inside. You have to pull it down with a ratchet strap and pull it towards the transmission. That way it pulls it down out of the way. And that gives you enough room to turn. You have to drop and turn and rotate your stock pipe to the point where it can pull and slide out this way. Do not push prior or anything like that if you don't have to. Make sure that your sensor that is still in the pipe does not catch anything on the way out. You don't want to break or bend that over. Make sure that's in good shape, and you turn it, and then you can fish it down out of the truck. Now I'll crawl underneath the truck here and show you how I had to ratchet strap that pipe. Alright, now down underneath here, I had to run the ratchet strap around your torsion bar. That way it wouldn't be pulling on the transmission as it runs across, and up to a hole over there in the frame. And it comes across I had to go over, I had to twist that, take some slack out, had to go over the exhaust pipe and then back around and down to the other hole in another frame. That way when I tightened the ratchet strap, it would pull that pipe down, but it gave me room to be able to pull it over towards the transmission. So as I ratcheted it down, I manually pulled the pipe over towards the transmission and the ratchet strap held it in place. You have to take, obviously, that exhaust hanger off to be able to do this. Well, that concludes my removal video. I obviously have not put the new one in, so I'm not sure what I'm going to run into as far as putting that one in. Hopefully it's easier than the way it came apart, because everything has been broke loose. Oh, I almost forgot. On the new pipe, the nuts that are on the old pipe have to go onto the new pipe. They are a 10 by 1.5 millimeter nut. And because the old pipe's threads are all rusty and the bolt's rusty, they don't screw on to the new pipe well. So you're going to need a 10 by 1.25 either thread chaser or a tap and clean all the rust out of that before you install them onto this new pipe. Or go get yourself some new 10 by 1.25 nuts and washers or whatever you need to install that new pipe. Thanks for watching Big Frogs 4x4. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay tuned for the install video, and I'll walk you through any problems that I had with the install. God bless.